In today's video, we will be taking a look at my full 2024 election prediction in the presidential, senate, and gubernatorial level. This is my first full prediction of 2024 as we step away from the 2022 midterm election results. So I'm going to start off by looking at the presidential election and then move our way to senate and governors. The timestamps are in the description down below. So first off, let's look at the safe Democratic states. California, Hawaii, the state of Washington, New York, Massachusetts, D.C., Maryland, Rhode Island, Vermont. Those are not surprising whatsoever. And the Republicans, they have a lot of safe states. I'm just not going to be reading out every single one of them. So that should be relatively where the safe states should land us on both parties. Now let's go to the likely states. Some of these likely states doesn't really require any explanation. Some of these states will just be closer, but they will actually not be competitive whatsoever. This is basically the states that I expect the Democrats to win by 5 to 15 points. These are the likely Democratic states, and I will explain some of the potential other likely Democratic states in a bit. Now, for the likely Republican states, Kansas, obviously, the state of South Carolina, the state of Alaska, Iowa, Ohio, those are likely Republican states. Now we go to likely states that may require explanation. So the first likely state that may require explanation is the state of Texas. Texas is a fast-trending Democratic state, but we saw in 2022 Democrats' trends are really not that impressive. Democrats are losing ground in the Rio Grande Valley, some of the Hispanic areas. The Democrats are gaining ground in the suburbs. And the trend is actually quite slow, unlike people think, and 2024 may not be the year for Democrats to make Texas extremely competitive. The next state that will be likely is Florida. We saw what happened in this election cycle. The Senate and governor races were both safe for the Republican Party. I believe the Senate race was pretty much just 15 points on the mark, and Governor DeSantis won his race by a comfortable close to 18-point margin. That really shows that Florida is quite a conservative state, and although a Republican candidate may not have that great of appeal in the state of Florida, Ron DeSantis could probably be the presidential candidate in 2024. Thus, this race will definitely not be competitive whatsoever. Now, Maine 2nd District, this should not be surprising whatsoever given what we saw in 2020 and 2016. North Carolina is a state I also think will be a likely column. Now, if we look at the Democrats and the Republicans in 2022, they did underperform expectations in the state of North Carolina a little bit, but I mean that's probably not going to matter in the long run. Now we're going to be taking a look at some of the leftover likely Democratic states. I think the state of New Mexico is one of them, and I think that's the only one. New Mexico could be slightly more competitive because of the oil voters, but I think that this will still be a likely margin. Now let's go to the lean and tilt states for both parties. Let's start with the states that Democrats are going to win by a lean margin. Maine's at-large vote, I don't think that's very surprising. Maine's at-large should go to Democrats by a lean margin. New Hampshire, I think, could be a lean or tilt margin, but Democrats generally have a pretty good grip of that state. They win that state by quite a small margin, but they typically always win it. So I'm going to put in the tilt Democratic column for now. And for Minnesota as well, I think this will be a lean Democratic state. Democrats also win the state by pretty much all through history. In the past 60 years, Democrats have pretty much consistently won that state, aside from one or two elections. However, this race has become far more competitive in recent years due to a general Rust Belt trend towards the Republican Party. Now let's go to the lean Republican seats. The lean Republican seats there's quite a few states that are lean Republican. Wisconsin. Now, I previously had this race as likely, but given what we saw in 2022, a disappointing performance for Republicans in Wisconsin, I kind of doubt that Republicans could win by a likely margin, so a lean margin may be slightly better. I also think that the state of Michigan could be a lean to tilt margin. I'm going to play as lean right now because I think that Republicans could do very well with a candidate like Ron DeSantis, who may be a southerner, but could really appeal to some of these working class voters. I'm going to leave Pennsylvania for now, and I'm going to go to the state of Arizona. Again, we might see a more moderate Republican candidate like Ron DeSantis, which is probably who I think will get the nomination. Thus, this race could be more competitive, could be more Republican favoring. Now, the final states will be tilt seats for both parties. Republicans are already at 271, which means they will win the presidency. Let's look at each of these states in general. The state of Nevada, I still think Republicans have the edge. It's a very narrow edge, but I think that in 2022, Democrats did very well in Nevada. Republicans won the governor's race by a decent margin. I mean, it is Nevada. It's a state that Democrats typically do win. So, that was pretty impressive. The Senate race, Republicans did lose by 1%, but that's not necessarily the largest of all margins to overcome, so I'm going to put this as a tilt seat for the Republicans. Now, going to the state of Pennsylvania, we have the Rust Belt. They typically do not break and vote on one way. I think that Wisconsin is the reddest of all of them. Now, typically, Michigan is more Democratic, but we saw in 2022 that Democrats did very well in Pennsylvania. They did very well in the governor's race. They did very well in the Senate race in Pennsylvania. So I'm going to put this as a tilt state for the Democrats. Plus, Joe Biden may end up running again, and he is from the state of Pennsylvania after all. So let's go to the final two districts here, or states, I should say. Nebraska second. I do put this as a tilt Democratic seat, a seat that is trending to the Democrats quite heavily. I mean, just two decades ago, this was a safe Republican seat. Now it's a seat that's competitive. It's only one electoral vote, but that could make or break an election. Now, not so much right now, but in the previous map, it actually could. Now, finally, for the state of Georgia, I still give this race to the Republicans, because this state, although trending Democratic, I don't think the trend will be that fast to really guarantee the Democrats a victory in that state. And I think that a lot of the issues, the economy is just not going well with Biden, so I think that Georgia may be a tilt state for the Republican Party. Now let's go to the Senate elections. Now, the Republicans had a very disappointing showing in the 2022 Senate elections, which happened not long ago. But if we look at this map here, it is a lot more favorable for the Republicans. Republicans, they have their seats locked up. Except you can maybe argue the state of Florida is in play here. But Rick Scott may not be the most popular Republican senator in Florida, but I think he should be able to hang on. Democrats, however, have quite a few seats that are really on the verge of losing. Democrats could lose Montana, could lose the Rust Belt, Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, could lose the very vulnerable Democratic Senator Joe Manchin, could lose Sherrod Brown in the state of Ohio, could lose Arizona's Christian Sinema, could lose Nevada's Jackie Rosen. So Democrats have a lot of seats they can lose in the Senate, and they are pretty much guaranteed to take back the Senate in 2024, given how many Democratic seats are hanging. Now I'm going to start off by giving the Democrats their safe seats. So for the Democratic safe seats here, I'm really just going to give the Democrats all their expected safe seats. New Jersey will be slightly more competitive. I'll put in the likely margin. The states of Vermont and Maine actually have independents, but they always sided with the Democrats, so that's that. Virginia as well, with Tim Kaine, very popular there. The state of Hawaii as well, so that will be the safe states for the Democrats. The Republicans, they have their safe states. Now, notably, some states like West Virginia have senators from the Democratic Party, but we'll see if that will change by the end of this map. So the two remaining seats that I'm not voting that have Republican incumbents are Texas and Florida, which will both be likely Republican. Texas in 2018 was actually very competitive. Beto O'Rourke made this race within 3 percentage points, but I don't think that will be the case in 2024. 2018 was a very good year for the Democrats. Democrats did really well in the Hispanic areas and the Fort Worth, Dallas area. And I just don't think Beto O'Rourke will be able to do that yet again. If he is the nominee, and if he isn't the nominee, it could be even worse for the Democrats. So yeah. Now looking at the states remaining, these are all states with Democratic incumbents. Now states like New Mexico may not be that competitive, but they will probably not be in the safe Democratic column. Instead, they will probably be in the likely Democratic column. New Mexico will be in the likely Democratic column. We will be talking about the state of Minnesota with Amy Klobuchar, likely Democratic column as well. And that pretty much sums it up for the likely Democratic states. Now I'm going to go to the states that may potentially flip for the Republicans by a lean margin. But before that, I'm going to go to the lead Democratic states. Now first off, in the state of Wisconsin, we probably will see the Democrats hold on by probably a lead to tilt margin. At this point, I will bet a tilt margin given that there is a presidential election race in that state of Wisconsin. But Democrats really do very well in some of these Senate races in 2020. They did very well. They won Wisconsin by 11. They won the state of Michigan by 7. Not as great. And they won the state of Pennsylvania by 13. So really good performances by the Democrats there. And I think that they will be able to hang on to all three of those states. Although this is a presidential election year, Republicans are likely going to win all three of those presidential election races. I think that the Senate may have a few voters split their ballots, and those races will be enough for Democrats to win those seats. Now, for the final 5 seats here, these are seats with definitely high chance of flipping. The first state that I think will flip is the state of West Virginia. Now, previously, in one of my videos, had this race as a safe Republican seat, but I am changing that characterization because the polling today does suggest that Joe Manchin could be upwards already at 50% of those polls. And although I do not trust them, they don't always overestimate the Democrats, as we saw in 2022. So I'm going to just play the lead Republican seat. In the end, West Virginia is West Virginia, and Joe Manchin underperformed by 20 points compared in 2018 compared to 2012 in a presidential election year. That is. Another seat that will likely flip to Republicans, Montana, which is quite inevitable at this point. You can see that John Tester was in a fight for his life the first day he pretty much won that Senate race. He consistently won by about a 3 to 4 point margin, and Tester only won with 50.3% of the votes. And as you can see, he did do very well for a Democrat there, but it was a very close race. In the end, I do think that Democrats will end up losing that race because, first of all, this is a presidential election year in 2024. Thus, there will be a presidential election in which Democrats are likely going to lose that presidential election in the state of Montana by around a 15-point margin, which will be very hard for John Tester to overcome, given that 2018 was a midterm election year that had a Republican president, and to a very favorable year for Democrats, Tester only won by 3. Now let's go to the state of Nevada. Nevada, Jackie Rosen did win by 5, but that was actually good for her because she was facing a incumbent. She won by 50,000 votes, but is that really enough? There is a presidential election that may not help or hurt either party because I pretty much have that race as a toss-up. I did give it to Republicans, but that will be very close. But for a state of Nevada Senate, I don't think Jackie Rosen necessarily has the popularity to win. Now, she could very well win, but I just don't feel like that will be the case, and thus I'll put it in the tilt Republican column. Now, next for the state of Arizona. Now, Kristen Sinema is not really liked by either Republicans or Democrats. Republicans are simply not going to vote for a Democrat, and Democrats don't like Kristen Sinema for blocking all their bills and things like that, and for that, I'm just going to put it in the lead Republican column. Finally, for the state of Ohio. Now, Ohio previously I thought was going to be a very clean-cut state. However, it just seems like that is actually not the case. Because Sherrod Brown did win by a decent margin in 2018, and this is a presidential election year. So, signs to point to a Republican victory. Because although Sherrod Brown did win by a very impressive margin for a Democrat in Ohio, 2018 was a very good year for Democrats. And Jim Renacci basically gave up because some polls had him losing by 15, and he just didn't think it was worth it to actually fight for that race, and Republicans all gave up. However, if they did not give up, this race could have been decided by a very close margin, and really we're talking about Trump winning the state by 10 in the presidential level, if not more. So it could be very hard for Democrats to hang on. But also, Sherrod Brown is a pretty popular incumbent. So I'm just going to put this race as a state that does go to Republicans by a lead margin. But this race could actually be really interesting. Finally, the governors. The governors, we don't have much to talk about in the governor races. Many of these races are just not competitive. I mean, Washington, Montana, North Dakota, Missouri, Indiana, North Carolina, West Virginia, Delaware, Vermont, and New Hampshire. Now, some of these governor races, they do have extremely Democratic or Republican populations, but they could vote in another way. And some of these races aren't in that case, but only really one seat is competitive, the state of North Carolina, which we'll go to later on. Now, for the two safe Democratic seats, so for the fill function here, Washington and Delaware, those seats should be safe for the Democratic Party. Potentially, Washington could be likely, given that in 2020 we didn't see necessarily the largest margin. In fact, I'll just put it as likely because why not? But for the other races here, Republicans, they will easily win all of these races by safe margins. Montana could be a little bit closer because that is typically how Montana votes. Montana is closer in the governor races almost all the time. And finally, for the state of North Carolina. North Carolina, we have the Democrat Roy Cooper, who is really popular in the state of North Carolina, actually. Maybe not as popular as people think, but still very popular. But this is a presidential year in which I do expect Republicans to win the state of North Carolina by 5. But in the end, I don't think that will be enough. Democrats do still have Roy Cooper, who is someone who really Republicans don't dislike to the point that they really want to vote against him, so that the voter turnout in the Republican Party could actually be quite low, thus giving Democrats a narrow victory. So that will be it, the presidential map, the Senate map, and the governors. Thank you for watching. Have a nice day. Goodbye.